Miguel Street, Chapter 11. The Blue Cart. There were many reasons why I wanted to be like Eddowes when I grew up. He was one of the aristocrats of the street. He drove a scavenging cart and so worked only in the mornings. Then, as everybody said, Eddowes was a real saga boy. This didn't mean that he wrote epic poetry. It meant that he was a sweet man, a man of leisure, well-dressed and keen on women. Hat used to say, "For a man who does drive a scavenging cart, this Eddowes too clean, you hear?" Eddowes was crazy about cleanliness. He used to brush his teeth for hours. In fact, if you were telling a stranger about Eddowes, you would say, "You know the little fellow with a toothbrush always in his mouth?" This was one thing in Eddowes I really admired. Once I stuck a toothbrush in my mouth and walked about our yard in the middle of the day. My mother said, "You playing, man? But why you don't wait until your pee make frat?" That made me miserable for days, but it didn't prevent me taking the toothbrush to school and wearing it there. It caused quite a stir. But I quickly realized that only a man like Eddowes could have worn a toothbrush and carried it off. Eddowes was always well dressed. His khaki trousers were always creased and his shoes always shone. He wore his shirts with 3 buttons undone so you could see his hairy chest. His shirt cuffs were turned up just above the wrist and you could see his gold wrist watch. Even when Eddowes wore a coat, you saw the watch. From the way he wore the coat, you thought that Eddowes hadn't realized that the end of the coat sleeve had been caught in the watch strap. It was only when I grew up I realized how small and how thin Eddowes really was. I asked Hat, "You think it's true all this talk Eddowes giving us about our woman running after him?" Hat said, "Well boy, woman these days funny like hell. They go run after a dwarf if he got money." I said, "I don't believe you." I was very young at the time, but I always thought, if I have one man in this world, woman bound to like that is Eddowes. He sat on his blue cart with so much grace, and how smart that toothbrush was in his mouth. But you couldn't talk to him when he was on his cart. Then he was quite different from the Eddowes we knew on the ground. Then he never laughed, but was always serious, and if he tried to ride on the back of his cart, as we used to on the back of his ice cart, Eddowes would crack his whip at us in a nasty way and shout, "What sort of cat you think this is? Your father can't buy a cat like this, you hear?" Every year, Eddowes won the city council's award for the cleanest scavenging cart. And to hear Eddowes talk about his job was to make yourself feel sad and inferior. He said he knew everybody important in Port of Spain, from the governor down. He would say, "Collected 2-3 tins of rubbish from the director of medical services yesterday. I know him good, you know. Been collecting his rubbish for years, ever since he was a little doctor in Woodbrook, catching hell. So I see him yesterday and he say, 'Eddowes,' that is how he does always call me, you know. 'Eddowes,' he say, 'come and have a drink.' Well, when I working I don't like drinking because it does keep you back. But he nearly dragged me off the cart, man. In the end I had to drink with him. He tell me all his troubles." There were also stories of rich women waiting for him behind rubbish tins, women begging Eddowes to take away their rubbish. But you should have seen Eddowes on those days when the scavengers struck. As I have told you already, these scavengers were proud people and stood for no nonsense from anybody. They knew they had power. They could make Port of Spain stink in 24 hours if they struck. On these important days, Eddowes would walk slowly and thoughtfully up and down Miguel Street. He looked grim then and fierce, and he wouldn't speak to a soul. He wore a red scarf and a toothbrush with a red handle on these days. Sometimes we went to Woodford Square to the strike meeting to gaze at these exciting people. It amazed me to see Edders singing. The songs were violent, but Edders looked so sad. Had told me, "It have detectives here, you know. They taking down every word Edders and them saying." It was easy to recognize the detectives. They were wearing a sort of plainclothes uniform, brown hats, white shirts, and brown trousers. They were writing in big notebooks with red pencils. And Edders didn't look scared. We all knew that Edders wasn't a man to be played with. You couldn't blame Edders then for being proud. One day, Edders brought home a pair of shoes and showed it to us in a quiet way, as though he wasn't really interested whether we looked at the shoes or not. He said, brushing his teeth and looking away from us, "Got these shoes today from La Base, the dump, you know. They was just laying there and I picked them up." We whistled. The shoes are practically new. "The things people throw away," Edders said. And he added, "This is a hell of a sort of job, you know. You could get anything if you really look. I know a man who got a whole bed the other day. And when I was picking up some rubbish from St. Clair the other day, the stupid woman rushed out begging me to come inside. She said she was going to give me a radio." "Boy," he said, "you mean these rich people just throw things away like that?" Edders laughed and looked away, pitying our simplicity. The news about Edders and the shoes travelled round the street pretty quickly. My mother was annoyed. She said, "You see what sort of life is here? Here I is, working my finger to the bone. Nobody flinging me a pair of shoes just like that, you know. And there you got that thin-ass little man doing next to nothing, and look at all the things he does get." Edders presently began getting more things. He brought home a bedstead. He brought home dozens of cups and saucers, only slightly cracked, lengths and lengths of wood, all sorts of bolts and screws, and sometimes even money. Edders said, "I was walking to one of the old boys today. He tell me the thing is to never throw away shoes. Always look in shoes that people throw away, and you go find all sort of thing." The time came when we couldn't say if Edders was proud of his job or of his collecting of junk. He spent half an hour a day unloading the junk from his cart, and if anybody wanted a few nails or a little piece of corrugated iron, the first person they asked was Edders. He made a tremendous fuss when people asked him, though I feel he was pleased. He would say, "I working hard all day, getting all these materials and them, and people think they just go come and run all over and say, 'Give me this, give me that.'" In time, the street referred to Edders' collection of junk as Edders' materials. One day, after he opened his school, Titus Hoyt was telling us that he had to spend a lot of money to buy books. He said, "It go cost me at least $60. Edders asked, "How much book you getting for that?" Titus Hoyt said, "Oh, about 7 or 8. Edders laughed in a scornful way. Edders said, "I could get you a whole handful for you for about 12 cents. Why you want to go and spend so much money for 8 books for?" Edders sold a lot of books. Had bought 20 cents worth of books. It just shows how Titus Hoyt was making everybody educated. And there was this business about pictures. Edders said one day, "Today I pick up 2 nice pictures, 2 nice sceneries, done frame and everything." I went home and I said, "Ma, Edders say he go sell us some sceneries for 12 cents. My mother behaved in an unexpected way. She wiped her hand on her dress and came outside. Edders brought the sceneries over. He said, "The glass a little dirty, but you could always clean that. But there is nice sceneries." They were engravings of ships in stormy seas. I could see my mother almost ready to cry from joy. She repeated, "I always want to have some nice sceneries." Then pointing at me, she said to Edders, "This boy father was always painting sceneries, you know." Edders looked properly impressed. He asked, Scenery's nice as this? My mother didn't reply. After a little talk, my mother paid Edders 10 cents. And if Edders had something that nobody wanted to buy, he always went to my uncle Baku, who was ready to buy anything. He used to say, "You never know when these things go come in handy." Hat began saying, "I think all this material's getting on Edders' mind, you know. It have some men like that." I wasn't worried until Edders came to me one day and said, "You ever think of collecting whole bus ticket?" The idea had never crossed my mind. Edders said, "Look, there's something for a little boy like you to start with. For every 1,000 you collect, I go give you a penny." I said, "Why you want bus ticket?" He laughed as though I were a fool. I didn't collect any bus tickets, but I noticed a lot of other boys doing so. Edders had told them that for every 100 they collected, they got a free ride. Hat said, "It's to start getting worried when you begin collecting pins." But something happened that made Edders sober as a judge again. He said one day, "I in trouble." Hat said, "Don't tell us that it's thief you've been thieving all this material on them." Edders shook his head. He said, "A girl making baby for me." Hat said, "You sure it's for you?" Edders said, "She says so." It was hard to see why this should get Edders so worried. Hat said, "But don't be stupid, man. It's the sort of thing that does happen to anybody." But Edders refused to be consoled. He collected junk in a listless way. Then he stopped altogether. Hat said, "Edders behaving as though he invent the idea of making baby." Hat asked again, "You sure this baby is for you and not for nobody else? It have some woman making a living this way, you know." Edders said, "It's true she have had a baby, but I in trouble." Hat said, "She's like Lara." Edders said, "Nah, Lara does only have one baby for one man. This girl does have 2, 3. Hat said, "Look, you mustn't worry. You don't know it's your baby. Wait and see. Wait and see." Edders said sadly, "She said if I don't take the baby, she gonna make me lose my job." We gasped. Edders said, "She know lots of people. She said she gonna make them take me away from St. Clair and put me in Dry River, where the people them so damn poor they don't throw away nothing." I said, "You mean you not going to find any materials there?" Edders nodded and we understood. Hat said, "The Calypsonian was right, you hear. Man centipede bad, woman centipede more than bad." I know the sort of woman. She have a lot of baby, take the baby by the fathers and get the fathers to pay money. By the time she 33, 35, she getting so much money from so much man and she ain't got no baby to look after and no responsibility. I know the thing. Boy said, "Don't worry, Edders. Wait and see if it is your baby. Wait and see." Hat said, "Boy, ain't you too damn small to be meddling with talk like this?" The months dragged by. One day, Edders announced, "She dropped the baby yesterday." Hat said, "Boy or girl?" "Girl." We felt very sorry for Edders. Hat asked, "You think it's yours?" "Yes." "You bringing it home?" "In about a year or so." "Then you ain't got nothing to worry about. If it's your child, bring she home, man. And you're still going round St. Clair getting your materials." Edders agreed, but he didn't look any happier. Hat gave the baby a nickname long before she arrived in Miguel Street. He called her Pleasure, and that was how she was called until she became a big girl. The baby's mother brought Pleasure one night, but she didn't stay long. And Edders' stock rose when we saw how beautiful the mother was. She was wild, Spanish looking. But one glance at Pleasure made us know that she couldn't be Edders' baby. Boy began whistling the calypso. "Chinese children calling me daddy, I black like jet." My wife liked her baby, and still Chinese children calling me daddy. Oh God, somebody putting milk in my coffee. Hat gave boy a pinch, and Hat said to Edders, she's a good-looking child, Edders, like you. Edders said, you think so, Hat? Hat said, yes, man, I think she go grow up to be a sweet, sweet girl, just as though the father is a sweet man. I said, you have a nice daughter, Edders. The baby was asleep and pink and beautiful. Errol said, I could wait 16 years until she come big enough. Edders by this time was smiling, and for no reason at all was bursting out into laughter. Hat said, shut up, Edders, you go wake the baby up. And Edders asked, you really think she take after me, Hat? Hat said, yes, man, I think you do right, Edders. If I wasn't so careful myself, and if I did have children outside, I would have bring them all home, put them down. Bring them all home and put them down, man. Nothing to shame about. Edders said, Hat, it have a bird cage I pick up long time now. Tomorrow I go bring it for you. Hat said, it's a long, long time now I want a good bird cage. And in no time at all, Edders became the old Edders we knew, proud of his job, his junk, and now proud too of pleasure. She became the street baby, and all the women, Mrs. Morgan, Mrs. Baku, Laura, and my mother helped to look after her. And if there was anyone in Miguel Street who wanted to laugh, he kept his mouth shut when Pleasure got the first prize in the Cow and Gate baby competition, and her picture came out in the papers. End of chapter 11.